Single dad says, "Come with me." He and his daughter found a poor, paralyzed woman at the bus stop. "Before we begin, tell me something about where you live. What's the weather like today?" The autumn rain fell steadily on Maple Street as Michael Thompson adjusted his daughter's pink raincoat hood for the third time. Emma, just 6 years old, skipped beside him despite the weather, her tiny hand clasped firmly in his calloused palm. The remnants of their evening walk to the corner store clung to their clothes, the scent of fresh bread and the warmth of shared hot chocolate still lingering between them. "Daddy, look!" Emma's voice pierced through the rhythmic patter of raindrops. She pointed toward the bus stop ahead, where a figure sat motionless on the metal bench. Michael squinted through the dim streetlight. A woman, perhaps in her late 20s, sat hunched forward in a wheelchair that had seen better days. Her dark hair hung in wet strands around her face, and her clothes, a thin sweater and worn jeans, offered little protection against the October chill. No bus shelter covered this particular stop, leaving her completely exposed to the elements. "She's all alone, Daddy," Emma whispered, tugging at his jacket sleeve, "and she's getting soaked." Michael's chest tightened. 3 years of single parenthood had taught him to be cautious, to protect Emma from the harsh realities of the world. But it had also taught him the value of compassion, something his late wife Jennifer had embodied so perfectly. He could almost hear her gentle voice. "Michael, we help when we can help." They approached slowly, Michael's protective instincts at war with his innate kindness. The woman didn't look up, even as their footsteps echoed against the wet pavement. Her shoulders shook, whether from cold or something deeper, he couldn't tell. "Excuse me," Michael called softly, not wanting to startle her. "Are you waiting for the number 42? The woman's head lifted slowly, revealing a face marked by exhaustion and something that looked like resignation. Her eyes, a striking green despite their weariness, met his with a mixture of surprise and wariness. Yes, though I think I missed the last one." "The last bus ran 20 minutes ago," Michael confirmed, glancing at his watch. It was nearly 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, hardly the time for anyone to be stranded at an isolated bus stop. "Do you have someone you can call?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "No, no one." Emma stepped forward before Michael could stop her, her innocent eyes wide with concern. "You're really cold, aren't you?" she asked the stranger. "Your lips are purple." The woman's expression softened as she looked at Emma. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Don't worry about me." But Michael was already worrying. The temperature was dropping, and the forecast had mentioned possible frost. No taxi would venture into this neighborhood at this hour, and the next bus wouldn't arrive until morning. He thought about Jennifer again, about the time she'd insisted they help an elderly man whose car had broken down, despite being late for dinner reservations. She'd always said that kindness was never inconvenient if you had the right heart. "Look," Michael said, surprising himself with his own words, "I live just 3 blocks from here. You can't stay out in this weather. Why don't you come with me, just until morning when the buses start running again?" The woman stared at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to know you to see that you need help," Michael replied. He crouched down to Emma's level, speaking quietly. "Sweetheart, what do you think? Should we help this lady?" Emma nodded vigorously. "She looks sad, Daddy, like when I have bad dreams." Michael stood and extended his hand to the woman. "My name is Michael Thompson. This is my daughter, Emma. And you are." For a long moment, she simply stared at his outstretched hand. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah Miller." "Well, Sarah Miller, it's nice to meet you. Come on, let's get you somewhere warm and dry." Sarah's eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. I don't understand why you'd do this. You don't know anything about me. I could be dangerous. I could be lying about my name." Michael smiled, the same gentle smile that had made Jennifer fall in love with him 15 years ago. "Maybe, but right now, you're just someone who needs help, and that's enough for me." The walk to Michael's house was slow, but filled with an odd sense of purpose. Emma chattered about her favorite rainy day activities, trying to fill the silence that stretched between the adults. Sarah listened, but said little, her hands gripping the wheels of her chair with white knuckles. Occasionally, Michael would catch her staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with something that looked almost like fear. Their house on Oak Avenue was modest but welcoming, with a wraparound porch that Jennifer had insisted on when they'd bought it 7 years ago. The yellow paint was fading slightly, and the garden showed signs of a man too busy working and caring for a child to maintain it properly. But warm light spilled from the windows, and Emma's bicycle sat proudly beside the front steps. "Home, sweet home," Michael announced, pushing open the front door and holding it wide for Sarah. The interior was clean, but clearly lived in, with Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator and a few dishes waiting in the sink. A framed photograph on the mantel showed Michael, Emma, and a beautiful blonde woman with kind eyes, the only obvious evidence of the family's loss. "I'll get you some dry clothes," Michael said, disappearing upstairs. "Emma, can you show Sarah where the bathroom is?" As Emma led Sarah down the hallway, chattering about the house's history and her father's cooking skills, Sarah found herself overwhelmed by the simple normalcy of it all. The scent of home, fabric softener, vanilla candles, and something distinctly masculine filled her senses. It had been so long since she'd been inside a real home, surrounded by the evidence of people who loved each other. Michael returned with a soft grey sweatshirt and a pair of sweatpants. "These were..." He paused, then continued gently, "These should fit you fine. The bathroom has clean towels, and there's a hairdryer in the cabinet if you need it." 20 minutes later, Sarah emerged, looking like a different person. The dry clothes hung slightly loose on her thin frame, but colour had returned to her cheeks. Michael had prepared a simple meal of grilled cheese and tomato soup, and the kitchen felt warm and inviting as they sat around the small table. "This is really good," Sarah said, taking her first real bite of food in what felt like days. "Thank you." "Emma helped with the soup," Michael said, ruffling his daughter's hair. "She's quite the chef." Emma beamed with pride. "I put extra cheese in it. Cheese makes everything better." As they ate, Sarah found herself studying this little family that had welcomed her so unconditionally. Emma's eyes sparkled with the kind of innocence that comes from being truly loved and protected. Michael moved with the quiet confidence of a man comfortable in his role as both mother and father. There was sadness in his eyes, the same sadness Sarah had seen in her own reflection, but it was tempered by hope and genuine contentment. "Where are you from, Sarah?" Michael asked gently, not wanting to pry, but genuinely curious about this mysterious woman who'd appeared in their lives. Sarah's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Originally? California, but I've been traveling for a while now." "That sounds adventurous," Emma piped up. "I want to travel someday. Daddy says we might go to Disney World next summer." "That sounds wonderful," Sarah replied, her voice carrying a wistfulness that made Michael's heart ache. After dinner, Michael insisted on helping Sarah get settled in the guest room, a small but comfortable space that had once served as Jennifer's home office. As he adjusted the pillows and made sure she had everything she needed, Sarah watched him with growing amazement. "I don't understand you," she said suddenly. "People don't just do this. Take in strangers, risk their safety and their children's safety for someone they've never met." Michael sat on the edge of the bed, his expression thoughtful. "My wife used to say that kindness is just love in work clothes. She believed that we're all connected somehow, that helping each other isn't just the right thing to do, it's the only thing that makes sense." "Used to say?" Sarah asked, though she'd already guessed from the past tense and the photograph on the mantel. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer." Michael's voice remained steady, but Sarah could see the pain that still lived just beneath the surface. "She was the kindest person I've ever known. I tried to live the way she would want me to live." Sarah felt tears threatening again. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. And I'm sorry for whatever brought you to that bus stop tonight." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Michael stood. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow we can figure out where you need to go and how to get you there." As he reached the door, Sarah called out softly. "Michael." He turned back. "Yeah? Thank you. I know it doesn't seem like much, but thank you." Michael smiled. "Get some sleep, Sarah. Everything will look brighter in the morning." But as he closed the door and headed to his own room, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that bringing Sarah home had set something in motion, something that would change their lives in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Emma's voice drifted from her bedroom as she talked to her stuffed animals about their new friend Sarah, and Michael found himself wondering what tomorrow would bring. In the guest room, Sarah stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. The kindness of this father and daughter was almost overwhelming after months of surviving on the streets, of being invisible to a world that had given up on her. But more than that, something about this house felt familiar in a way that made her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. As the clock struck midnight, Sarah finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that her presence had already begun to unlock secrets that had been buried for 3 long years. The morning sun streamed through the guest room windows, casting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. Sarah woke slowly, momentarily disoriented by the softness of real sheets and the absence of city noise. For just a moment, she allowed herself to believe this was all real, that she'd found sanctuary in this little house with its kind occupants. From downstairs came the sounds of a household awakening, the gentle clink of dishes, the soft murmur of voices, and something that smelled like bacon and coffee. Sarah had forgotten how comforting these simple domestic sounds could be. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Sarah, are you awake?" Michael's voice carried through the door. "Breakfast is ready when you are. No rush." "I'll be right down," she called back, her voice still thick with sleep. As she transferred from the bed to her wheelchair, Sarah caught her reflection in the dresser mirror. The hollow-cheeked woman staring back at her looked almost human again, thanks to a night of real sleep and the borrowed clothes that actually fit. Downstairs, the kitchen was alive with morning energy. Emma sat at the table in her school uniform, a blue jumper over a white shirt, her hair in 2 neat braids that spoke of her father's improving parenting skills. Michael stood at the stove, spatula in hand, looking remarkably domestic for someone she'd met less than 12 hours ago. "Good morning, sunshine," he called cheerfully. "I hope you like eggs. Emma insisted on making you a special breakfast." "I made heart-shaped pancakes," Emma announced proudly, pointing to a plate of slightly lopsided but unmistakably heart-shaped pancakes. "Daddy helped with the flipping part because I'm not tall enough yet." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "They're beautiful, Emma, thank you." As Michael served breakfast, Sarah found herself marveling at the easy routine of this little family. Emma chatted about her upcoming show-and-tell presentation, while Michael packed her lunch with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing it alone for years. There was a rhythm to their morning that spoke of hard-won stability and mutual dependence. "So," Michael said, settling at the table with his own coffee, "what's the plan for today? Where can I take you?" Sarah's fork paused over her eggs. The question she'd been dreading had arrived sooner than expected. Honestly, I'm not sure. I've been staying at the shelter downtown, but they're full most nights. Last night I was just trying to figure out my next move." Michael and Emma exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that comes from being each other's primary companion. Emma nodded slightly, as if answering an unasked question. "You know," Michael said carefully, "if you need a few more days to get your bearings, you're welcome to stay. The guest room isn't being used for anything important." Sarah stared at him. "You can't be serious. You barely know me." "Maybe not," Michael replied, buttering Emma's toast. "But Emma seems to like you, and she's an excellent judge of character. Besides, what kind of man would I be if I sent you back out there without knowing you had somewhere safe to go?" "A practical one," Sarah said softly. "A smart one. Most people would. Most people aren't raising a little girl who asks questions about why some people don't have homes," Michael replied. "Emma's learning that we help when we can help. Right, sweetheart?" Emma nodded vigorously. "And Sarah needs help right now. Plus, She's really nice, and she has pretty eyes, and she didn't mind when I talked too much last night. Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. You didn't talk too much, Emma. I enjoyed listening to you. As Michael prepared to leave for work, he was a foreman at a local construction company, he explained. Sarah felt a familiar panic rising. What if this was all some elaborate setup? What if he called the police while he was gone? What if Emma said something that revealed Sarah's past? Hey, Michael said gently, apparently reading her expression. You okay? I'm not used to people being kind without wanting something in return. Michael crouched beside her chair, his eyes serious. Sarah, I don't know what you've been through, and you don't have to tell me unless you want to. But I need you to understand something. In this house, kindness doesn't come with a price tag. You're safe here. After Michael left for work and Emma for school, Sarah found herself alone in the house for the first time. The silence was different from the harsh quiet of shelters or the chaotic noise of the streets. This was peaceful silence, filled with the comfortable creaks and sighs of a home that was truly lived in. She wheeled herself around the first floor, taking in details she'd missed the night before. Family photos showed the progression of Emma from baby to toddler to the bright 6-year-old she was now, always with at least one parent beaming proudly beside her. The blonde woman from the mantle photo, Jennifer, Michael had said, appeared in most of the early pictures, her smile radiant and her eyes sparkling with joy. In the living room, Sarah found a bookshelf filled with an eclectic mix of children's books, construction manuals, and what appeared to be Jennifer's collection of romance novels. A small wooden box sat on the middle shelf, slightly apart from the books. Without thinking, Sarah reached for it. Inside, she found letters tied with a blue ribbon. The top envelope bore Michael's name in feminine handwriting, and the postmark was dated just 3 months before Jennifer's death. Sarah knew she shouldn't look, knew this was private, but something compelled her to carefully extract the first letter. My dearest Michael, it began, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I hope you're taking care of yourself and our beautiful Emma. I know this is hard, but I need you to know that the love we shared will always be part of you. Sarah quickly refolded the letter and returned it to the box, her hands trembling. This was a wife's final words to her husband, her last gift of love and guidance. It felt sacred, private, something she had no right to see. But as she placed the box back on the shelf, something else caught her eye. Tucked behind the wooden container was a manila folder, slightly worn and labeled Jennifer's Things, in Michael's careful handwriting. Something about it nagged at her, some inexplicable familiarity that made her pulse quicken. Before she could examine it further, the sound of a key in the front door made her wheel quickly away from the bookshelf. Emma bounded in, her school backpack sliding off her shoulders. Sarah, you're still here, Emma exclaimed, as if she'd expected Sarah to vanish like a dream. I told my teacher about you, and she said it was nice that Daddy helped someone. Mrs. Patterson says helping people is what makes us human. Mrs. Patterson sounds very wise, Sarah replied, grateful for the distraction from her snooping. She is. She's really old, though, like 40 or something. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. 40 isn't that old, Emma. It is when you're 6, Emma replied matter-of-factly. Want to see what I made in art class today? The afternoon passed pleasantly, with Emma chattering about school, while Sarah listened and occasionally helped with homework. When Michael returned from work, dusty and tired but smiling, he found them at the kitchen table working on a math worksheet together. How was your day? He asked Sarah, washing his hands at the sink. Peaceful, she replied honestly. Emma's been excellent company. She's pretty great, Michael agreed, dropping a kiss on his daughter's head. Speaking of which, young lady, how was the spelling test? I got all of them right except library, Emma reported. I forgot the second R. That's a tricky one, Michael sympathized. You'll get it next time. As they prepared dinner together, Michael cooking while Emma set the table and Sarah helped where she could from her chair, Sarah found herself marveling at how natural this felt. It had been so long since she'd been part of a family dynamic, even as a temporary guest. So, Michael said as they sat down to eat, I've been thinking, if you're comfortable with it and if you don't mind helping Emma with her after-school routine, you could stay for a while. I mean, if you want to. No pressure. Sarah set down her fork. Michael, I can't let you do that. You don't understand. I don't have any money to contribute. I can't pay rent or buy groceries or... Did I ask for money? Michael interrupted gently. Sarah, you helped Emma with her homework today. You listened to her stories and made her laugh. You can't put a price on that kind of companionship. But I'm a stranger, Sarah protested. You don't know anything about me, my past, my problems. Emma looked up from her mashed potatoes. Daddy says everyone has problems. That's what makes us all the same. Michael smiled at his daughter. That's right, sweetheart. We all have stuff we're dealing with. The question isn't whether you have problems, Sarah. It's whether you're trying to solve them. And are you? He asked quietly. Trying to solve them. Sarah met his eyes, seeing nothing but genuine concern and kindness. Yes, she whispered. I'm trying. Then that's enough for now, Michael replied. The rest we can figure out as we go. That night, as Sarah lay in the guest room that was starting to feel less foreign, she thought about the manila folder she'd glimpsed behind Jennifer's letters. Something about it had stirred a memory, triggered a recognition she couldn't quite place. But more than that, she found herself thinking about Michael's easy acceptance, Emma's innocent friendship, and the way this little family had welcomed her without question. For the first time in months, Sarah allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have something resembling a normal life again. She had no way of knowing that downstairs, Michael was having his own thoughts about the mysterious woman who'd appeared in their lives, or that Emma was telling her stuffed animals all about Sarah, the pretty lady who's sad like Daddy sometimes is. None of them could have imagined that the manila folder Sarah had noticed would soon reveal connections that would shake the very foundation of everything they thought they knew. 3 days had passed since Sarah's arrival, and the house on Oak Avenue had settled into an unexpectedly comfortable new rhythm. Michael left for work each morning with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in months, knowing that Emma would come home to someone who cared about her. Emma had taken to Sarah with the wholehearted acceptance that only children possess, treating her presence as if it were the most natural thing in the world. For Sarah, each day brought small revelations about what normal life could feel like. She woke to the sound of Emma's laughter and Michael's gentle morning voice. She helped with homework, listened to stories about school friendships and playground politics, and found herself genuinely invested in the daily dramas of a 6-year-old's life. But it was the quiet moments that affected her most profoundly, the way Michael hummed while doing dishes, the proud smile that crossed his face when Emma showed him her artwork, the comfortable silences that fell between them as they sat on the front porch in the evening. This was what a family looked like from the inside, and Sarah had almost forgotten such things existed. On Friday afternoon, while Emma was at a friend's birthday party and Michael was working late on a project, Sarah found herself alone in the house again. She'd been trying to respect their privacy, to not intrude on spaces that weren't meant for her. But the manila folder continued to haunt her thoughts. Jennifer's letters remained untouched on the bookshelf, but the folder seemed to call to her. Finally, unable to resist the nagging sense of familiarity, Sarah carefully retrieved it from its hiding place behind the wooden box. The tab simply read, "Jennifer's Things," in Michael's neat handwriting, but as Sarah opened it, her heart began to race. Inside were documents that made no immediate sense: insurance papers, medical records, and what appeared to be legal correspondence. But it was the photograph that made Sarah's world tilt dangerously. The picture showed Jennifer Thompson, but she wasn't the radiant blonde from the family photos. This Jennifer had dark hair and green eyes. This Jennifer looked exactly like Sarah. With trembling hands, Sarah examined the other documents in the folder. Jennifer's maiden name was listed as Jennifer Sarah Miller. Her birth date matched Sarah's own. Her social security number was 1 digit different from Sarah's. Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process what she was seeing. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. But as she stared at the photograph, at Jennifer's face that was so achingly familiar, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed began falling into place. The sense of familiarity she'd felt in this house, Emma's immediate acceptance of her, the way Michael sometimes looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, even Emma's comment about her pretty eyes, eyes that matched the ones in this hidden photograph. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet house. "Jennifer Miller, Jenny Miller." Memories crashed over her like a tidal wave. A sister 2 years younger, with whom she'd shared everything as children. Jenny, who'd been adopted at age 12 when their mother could no longer care for them. Jenny, who disappeared into a new life with new parents and a new name. Jenny, who Sarah had spent years trying to find before finally giving up hope. Jenny, who had married Michael Thompson and become Emma's mother. Jenny, who had died 3 years ago while Sarah was struggling with her own demons on the other side of the country. Sarah's hands shook as she rifled through the remaining documents, finding what she was looking for: Jenny's adoption papers. Jennifer Sarah Miller, adopted at age 12 by Robert and Margaret Thompson, name legally changed to Jennifer Sarah Thompson. The Thompson family had kept Jenny's original middle name, Sarah's name, the name that had connected the sisters from birth. Sarah's wheelchair felt suddenly unsteady as the full weight of the revelation hit her. She wasn't just a stranger Michael had helped out of kindness. She was Emma's aunt. She was the sister of the woman whose photographs smiled down from every room in this house. The sound of a car in the driveway sent panic racing through Sarah's veins. She quickly replaced the documents in the folder and returned it to its hiding place, her mind spinning with questions and implications she wasn't ready to face. Michael entered the house, looking tired but pleased to be home. "Hey," he called, hanging his jacket on the hook by the door. "How was your day? Where's Emma?" "She's still at the party," Sarah managed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Michael, we need to talk." Something in her tone made him stop and look at her carefully. "What's wrong? You look pale." Sarah's courage faltered under his concerned gaze. How could she tell him what she'd discovered? How could she explain that the woman he'd shown kindness to was actually connected to the family he'd lost, that she'd been living in his house, caring for his daughter, under false pretenses, even if she hadn't known it herself? She began, then stopped. The truth was too big, too complicated, too potentially devastating. "I just wanted to thank you again for everything you've done for me. I know it hasn't been easy taking in a stranger." Michael's expression softened, but Sarah could see he wasn't entirely convinced by her explanation. "You're not a stranger anymore, Sarah, and it hasn't been hard at all. If anything, having you here has been good for both Emma and me." The irony of his words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She wasn't a stranger, she was family. She was the aunt Emma had never known she had, the sister-in-law Michael had never met. But how could she tell him that without destroying the peaceful life they'd built together? "Michael," she said carefully, "what if you found out something about me, something big, something that changed everything?" He sat down across from her, his expression serious. "What kind of something?" Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. "Hypothetically, what if I wasn't who you thought I was?" Michael was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Sarah, I don't care what your past looks like. I don't care what mistakes you think you've made or what secrets you think you're hiding. You've been nothing but kind to Emma, and you've brought light back into this house. That's all that matters to me." His words should have been comforting, but they only made Sarah feel worse. He was accepting her based on incomplete information. He was extending kindness to someone he thought was a stranger, not knowing that the truth was far more complicated. Before she could respond, Emma burst through the front door, her face flushed with excitement and her arms full of party favors. "Sarah! Daddy!" she exclaimed. "You should have seen the cake. It was shaped like a castle, and there were princesses on it, and I got to take home a whole bag of candy." Sarah watched Emma's animated description of the party, seeing Jennifer in every gesture, every expression. The resemblance was there, subtle but unmistakable now that Sarah knew what to look for. Emma had Jennifer's smile and Michael's eyes, but her laugh was pure Miller family. "Sarah," Emma's voice broke through her reverie. "Are you okay? You look funny." "I'm fine, sweetheart," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But as the evening wore on, Sarah felt anything but fine. Every interaction with Emma felt loaded with new meaning. Every kind word from Michael felt like a deception she was perpetrating. The comfortable family dynamic that had developed over the past few days now felt like a lie. That night, as she lay in the guest room that had once been Jennifer's office, Sarah stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out what to do with her devastating discovery. She could tell Michael the truth and risk destroying the fragile peace they'd found. She could leave quietly and never burden them with the complications her presence would bring. Or she could stay silent and continue living in the shadow of her sister's memory. None of the options felt right. None of them felt fair to Michael or Emma, or even to Jennifer's memory. But as Sarah finally drifted off to sleep, she made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, she would find a way to tell Michael the truth. She owed him that much, no matter what the consequences might be. She had no way of knowing that Michael was lying awake in his own room, wrestling with his own secrets and suspicions, or that the manila folder she discovered was only the beginning of the revelations that would soon reshape all their lives. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. Sarah had spent most of the night rehearsing how she would tell Michael about her discovery, but each imagined conversation ended in disaster. How do you tell a man that the stranger he rescued is actually his dead wife's sister? How do you explain that you've been living under his roof, caring for his daughter, without knowing you were family? Michael was in the kitchen making pancakes when Sarah finally worked up the courage to approach him. Emma was still asleep, her soft breathing audible through the baby monitor Michael kept on the counter, a habit left over from when she was smaller that he couldn't quite bring himself to abandon. "Michael," Sarah said quietly, positioning her wheelchair where she could see his face, "we really need to talk." He looked up from the griddle, immediately sensing the gravity in her tone. "Okay, what's on your mind?" Sarah's carefully rehearsed words abandoned her. Instead, she found herself asking, "Tell me about Jennifer." "About how you met her." Michael's hands stilled over the pancake batter. It wasn't often that anyone asked about Jennifer anymore. Most people seemed to think that mentioning his late wife would cause him pain. But Sarah's question felt different, more intentional. "We met at a bookstore," he said, a small smile playing at his lips. "She was in the self-help section, reading about coping with family loss. I was looking for a manual on electrical wiring, riveting stuff, I know. She accidentally knocked over an entire display, trying to reach a book on the top shelf." Sarah's heart clenched. Jennifer had always been clumsy when she was nervous or upset. "I helped her pick up the books," Michael continued, "and somehow we ended up talking for 3 hours. She told me she'd been adopted as a kid and had recently lost her adoptive mother. Said she felt like she was floating, like she didn't quite belong anywhere." "What else did she tell you about her past, I mean?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Michael flipped a pancake with practiced ease, but Sarah could see the memories playing across his features. "Not much, especially at first. She said her birth family had some problems, addiction, instability. She'd been placed in foster care when she was 12, then adopted by the Thompsons. They were good people, gave her opportunities she never would have had otherwise." Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes. So Jennifer had found a good family after all. The fear that had haunted Sarah for years, that her little sister had ended up in a bad situation, had been unfounded. "Did she ever mention a sister?" Sarah asked, her voice catching slightly. Michael's attention sharpened. "Once, early in our relationship, she told me she'd had an older sister named Sarah who she'd lost touch with after the adoption. She tried to find her a few times over the years, but—" He trailed off, studying Sarah's face with growing intensity. "Why are you asking me this?" Before Sarah could answer, Emma's voice called from upstairs. "Daddy, I smell pancakes." "We'll be right back," Michael said to Sarah, his eyes never leaving her face. "This conversation isn't over." As Michael went to get Emma ready for the day, Sarah remained in the kitchen, her mind racing. Jennifer had tried to find her. Her sister had looked for her, just as Sarah had searched for Jennifer all those years. They'd been two people circling each other in the dark, never quite connecting until it was too late. When Michael and Emma returned, Emma immediately launched into her plans for the day, something involving a trip to the park and possibly ice cream if she was very good. But Michael's attention remained fixed on Sarah, and she could see the questions multiplying in his eyes. After breakfast, Michael suggested Emma play in her room for a while, promising they'd leave for the park soon. Once they were alone again, he sat across from Sarah at the kitchen table, his expression serious. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I need you to be honest with me. What's going on? Why the questions about Jennifer?" Sarah took a deep breath, knowing there was no going back after what she was about to say. "Yesterday, while you were at work, I found a folder behind Jennifer's letters on the bookshelf. I know I shouldn't have looked, but something about it felt familiar, and I—" Michael's expression grew guarded. "That folder is private, Sarah. Those are personal documents." "I know, and I'm sorry, but Michael, I found a photograph of Jennifer, an old one, before she dyed her hair blonde, and there were adoption papers, legal documents with her birth name." Michael stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Where is this going, Sarah?" "Jennifer's maiden name was Miller." "Jennifer Sarah Miller." Sarah's voice was steady now, strengthened by the certainty of truth. "Michael, I'm Sarah Miller. I'm Jennifer's older sister." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stood frozen at the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid with shock. When he finally turned around, his face was pale. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "Jennifer's sister. She would have contacted us. She would have been at the funeral. She would have." "I was in California," Sarah said, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "I was in rehab fighting my own demons. I didn't even know Jennifer had gotten married, had a child. I didn't know she was sick. By the time I was well enough to start looking for her again, it was too late." Michael sank back into his chair, running his hands through his hair. "You're telling me that you're Emma's aunt, that you're Jennifer's sister? I know how crazy it sounds. I know how impossible it seems, but Michael, look at me, really look at me." Sarah leaned forward in her chair. "Don't you see it? The resemblance?" Michael did look then, really looked, and Sarah could see the moment when recognition dawned, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, all Jennifer's mannerisms reflected in Sarah's face. "Oh my God," he whispered. "The green eyes?" "Jennifer's natural hair color was dark brown, just like yours, and you both have that little scar on your left eyebrow." Sarah touched the small scar unconsciously. "We were playing in the backyard when I was 8 and she was 6. She dared me to climb higher in the apple tree, and I fell." She felt guilty about that scar for years. Michael was staring at her as if seeing a ghost. "She used to trace that scar sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking. Said it reminded her of someone important she'd lost." They sat in stunned silence for several minutes, the weight of the revelation settling between them. Finally, Michael spoke. "So when I found you at that bus stop, when I brought you home—" "I had no idea," Sarah said quickly. "I swear to you, Michael, I had no idea who you were or that this was Jennifer's house. It wasn't until I saw that folder that everything clicked into place." Michael nodded slowly, processing this information. "That's why Emma took to you so quickly. That's why you seemed so comfortable here, why everything felt so right," Sarah finished. "Yes, I think maybe on some level we all recognized each other. Family has a way of calling to family, even when we don't understand why." From upstairs came the sound of Emma singing to herself, blissfully unaware that her world was about to change forever. Michael looked toward the ceiling, then back at Sarah. "We have to tell her," he said. "She has a right to know she has family." "Do we?" Sarah asked. "Michael, think about this. What if it's too confusing for her? What if it hurts her to know she had an aunt all along who wasn't there when her mother died? And what if she finds out later that we kept it from her? Michael countered. Emma's stronger than you think, Sarah, and she loved her mother so much. Knowing that part of Jennifer lives on in you, I think it would be a gift to her. Before Sarah could respond, Emma's voice called from the top of the stairs. Daddy, are we going to the park soon? You promised. Michael and Sarah exchanged glances. Coming, sweetheart, Michael called back. Then, quietly to Sarah, we'll figure this out together, okay? All of it. But first, let's give her a normal day at the park. Tonight, when she's calm and happy, we'll sit her down and explain everything. As they prepared to leave for the park, Sarah felt a mixture of terror and hope unlike anything she'd ever experienced. She was about to become part of a family, not just as a temporary guest, but as blood relation, as Emma's aunt, as the keeper of Jennifer's memory in a way she'd never imagined possible. But she was also about to risk everything. What if Emma rejected her? What if Michael decided that having Jennifer's troubled sister around was too complicated, too painful? What if the revelation destroyed the fragile happiness they'd all found together? At the park, Sarah watched Emma run and play with the other children, her laughter carrying on the autumn breeze. Michael sat beside her on a bench, both of them quiet with their own thoughts. She looks like Jennifer when she laughs, Sarah said softly. She does, Michael agreed. But you know what? She looks like you too. I can see it now, the shape of her chin, the way she scrunches her nose when she's thinking hard about something. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Emma make friends with a little boy on the swings. The normalcy of it all, the playground chatter, the parents calling to their children, the simple pleasure of a Saturday afternoon, felt precious and fragile. Michael, Sarah said eventually, what happens now? After we tell Emma, I mean. What happens to us? Michael was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he said honestly. This changes everything, doesn't it? You're not just someone I helped anymore. You're family. You're Emma's family. But what if... Sarah, Michael interrupted gently, let's take this one step at a time. Tonight we tell Emma, then we figure out what comes next. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the playground, they called Emma over. She ran to them, cheeks flushed from playing, grass stains on her jeans, and joy radiating from every pore. Can we get ice cream on the way home? She asked hopefully. Please, I was really good today. Michael smiled, ruffling her hair. You were indeed. Ice cream it is. As they left the park, Emma, walking between Michael and Sarah's wheelchair, chattering about her new friend and the game they'd invented, Sarah felt a bittersweet ache in her chest. This might be their last moment of simple, uncomplicated happiness. Tonight, everything would change, but looking at Emma's bright face and feeling Michael's steadying presence beside her, Sarah realized that maybe change wasn't something to fear. Maybe it was something to embrace. Maybe family, real, blood family, was worth the risk. The ice cream shop was busy with families enjoying the weekend, the cheerful chaos of children's voices mixing with the gentle hum of conversation. Emma had chosen a double scoop of strawberry with rainbow sprinkles, and she attacked it with the focused determination that only a 6-year-old could muster. Michael and Sarah sat across from her in the bright booth, neither of them eating their own ice cream. The weight of the conversation they needed to have hung heavy between them, even as they maintained cheerful facades for Emma's benefit. "Daddy, why aren't you eating your ice cream?" Emma asked, noticing Michael's untouched bowl of vanilla. "It's melting. Just thinking, sweetheart," Michael said, managing a smile. "Sometimes grown-ups think too much." "That's silly," Emma declared. "Ice cream tastes better when you don't think about it, right, Sarah?" Sarah looked at this little girl, her niece, she reminded herself with a start, and felt her heart constrict with love and fear in equal measure. "You're absolutely right, Emma. Sometimes the best things in life shouldn't be overthought." On the drive home, Emma fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from her day of playing. Michael and Sarah spoke in whispers, finalizing their plan for the conversation ahead. I think we should start with stories about Jennifer as a child, Michael suggested. Help Emma understand that Jennifer had a family before me, before Emma. And then gradually explain about sisters, about family connections, Sarah agreed. We need to make sure she understands that this doesn't change anything about how much Jennifer loved her, or how much you love her. Michael glanced in the rearview mirror at his sleeping daughter. She's going to have questions, lots of them. Why weren't you at the wedding? Why didn't Jennifer talk about you? Why weren't you there when she died? Sarah's throat tightened. I know, and I'll answer them as honestly as I can, even if the answers aren't pretty. After they carried Emma inside and she woke up enough to get into her pajamas, Michael suggested they all sit in the living room for a special talk. Emma, sensing the gravity in her father's voice, settled onto the couch between them, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. Emma, Michael began gently, you know how we have pictures of Mommy all around the house? Emma nodded, glancing at the framed photo on the nearby end table, Jennifer laughing at some long-forgotten joke, her arm around a much younger Emma. Well, before Mommy met me, before you were born, she had a family. She had parents who adopted her, and before that she had a sister. Emma's eyes widened with interest. Mommy had a sister, like how Tommy at school has a sister. Exactly like that, Michael said. Mommy's sister was older, like Tommy's sister, and they loved each other very much, just like you and a sister would. Where is she now? Emma asked, the logical next question. Why doesn't she come visit us? Michael and Sarah exchanged glances. This was the moment of truth. Emma, Sarah said softly, leaning forward in her wheelchair, I'm your mommy's sister. I'm your Aunt Sarah. Emma stared at Sarah for a long moment, her young mind processing this information. Your mommy's sister? She repeated slowly. Yes, sweetheart. Your mommy's name was Jennifer Sarah Miller before she became Jennifer Thompson. We have the same middle name because we're sisters. Emma's gaze moved between Sarah and the photograph of Jennifer, as if comparing them. You do look a little like Mommy, she said eventually. Your eyes are the same color as hers were before she got sick. Sarah felt tears welling up. We looked even more alike when we were little girls, like you. But why weren't you at our house before? Emma asked, her voice taking on the plaintive tone of a child trying to understand something beyond her years. Why didn't you come when Mommy was sick? This was the question Sarah had been dreading. She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes, Emma, families get separated. Sometimes people make mistakes or get sick in ways that make it hard for them to be together. I was sick for a long time. Not sick like Mommy was, but sick in my heart and my mind. And I didn't know where Mommy lived or that she had a beautiful little girl. Emma processed this with the straightforward acceptance that children often display when adults are honest with them. Were you sad that you couldn't find Mommy? Yes, baby. I was very, very sad. I looked for her for a long time. And now you found us instead? Michael smiled, reaching over to smooth Emma's hair. That's right, sweetheart. Sarah found us and we found her, and now we're all together. Emma was quiet for several minutes, absently stroking her elephant's worn fur. Finally, she looked up at Sarah with Jennifer's direct gaze. Are you going to stay with us now? Since you're my aunt and all? Sarah's heart clenched. Would you like me to stay? Emma nodded emphatically. Yes, I always wanted an aunt. Tommy's aunt brings him presents and takes him to movies. Will you do that with me? Despite everything, Sarah found herself laughing through her tears. I would love to do those things with you, Emma. If your daddy says it's okay. Of course it's okay, Michael said quietly. Sarah is family now. This is where she belongs. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of questions and explanations. Emma wanted to know everything. What Jennifer was like as a little girl, whether she and Sarah had fought like siblings do, what games they used to play. Sarah found herself sharing memories she hadn't accessed in years, painting pictures of a childhood that had been difficult but not without moments of joy. Mommy used to sing a song about a mockingbird, Emma said at one point. She said her big sister taught it to her. Sarah's voice was thick with emotion as she sang softly, Hush, little baby, don't say a word, Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. Emma joined in, her sweet voice blending with Sarah's, in a harmony that somehow felt like Jennifer's presence in the room. After Emma finally went to bed, with many hugs for both her daddy and her new Aunt Sarah, Michael and Sarah sat in the living room, emotionally drained but relieved. "That went better than I expected," Michael admitted. "She took it so well." "Children are resilient," Sarah replied, "and Emma has been raised with so much love. She knows she's safe, so she can accept new information without feeling threatened by it." Michael nodded, then grew serious. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Sarah tensed. "Okay. Earlier you mentioned rehab. You said you were dealing with your own demons. I need to know, are you clean? Are you sober? Because if you're going to be in Emma's life, if you're going to live in this house, I have to know that you're not going to bring any dangerous elements into her world." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I've been clean for 8 months. I was addicted to prescription painkillers after a car accident that left me paralyzed. I lost my job, my apartment, most of my friends. I spent 3 years on the streets before I finally got into a program that worked." Michael listened without judgment, his expression serious but not condemning. "I'm not going to lie to you," Sarah continued. "Recovery is a daily choice. Every day I wake up and choose sobriety. But Michael, I swear to you on Jennifer's memory, I will never let my past mistakes hurt Emma. If you ever have concerns about my sobriety, if you ever think I'm putting her at risk, you have every right to ask me to leave." Michael was quiet for a long moment. "I believe you," he said finally, "and I believe in you. But Sarah, if you're going to stay here, if you're going to be part of our family, then we need to set some boundaries, some rules. Of course, whatever you need. First, if you ever feel like you're struggling, if you ever feel like you might relapse, you tell me immediately. Don't try to handle it alone." Sarah nodded. "Agreed." "Second, Emma comes first. Always. In every decision we make, in every choice we face, Emma's well-being is the priority." "Absolutely." "And third," Michael's voice softened, "you need to understand that this is going to be complicated. You're not just Emma's aunt, you're Jennifer's sister. There are going to be moments when that's wonderful, and there are going to be moments when it's painful, for all of us." Sarah felt the truth of his words settle into her bones. "I know. And Michael, if it ever becomes too much, if having me here hurts more than it helps, you need to tell me. I'll understand." Michael shook his head. "I don't think that's going to happen. Emma lights up around you in a way I haven't seen since Jennifer died. And honestly, having you here feels like getting a piece of Jennifer back. Not her exactly, but a connection to her that I thought we'd lost forever." As they sat in the comfortable living room, surrounded by evidence of the life Jennifer had built with Michael and Emma, Sarah felt a profound sense of coming home. Not just to a house, but to a family, to a purpose, to a place where she belonged. "Michael," she said quietly, "thank you for everything, for rescuing me at that bus stop, for welcoming me into your home, for letting Emma know she has an aunt who loves her. I know none of this is what you expected when you decided to help a stranger." Michael smiled, the first genuinely relaxed smile she'd seen from him all day. "Life rarely gives us what we expect, Sarah. But sometimes, if we're really lucky, it gives us something better." As they prepared for bed that night, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. She'd gone from being homeless and hopeless to being part of a family, to having a place where she belonged. Emma had gained an aunt, and Michael had gained a sister-in-law he'd never known existed. But more than that, Jennifer's memory had gained a new keeper. Sarah could tell Emma stories about their mother's childhood that no one else could share. She could point out family traits and mannerisms that connected Emma to a history she'd never known existed. As Sarah settled into what was now truly her room, she whispered a prayer of gratitude to the sister she'd lost and found again in the most unexpected way. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new adjustments, as they figured out how to be a family of 3, bound together by loss and love, and the miraculous coincidence that had brought them together. But tonight, Sarah Miller, Emma Thompson's aunt, Jennifer's sister, Michael's sister-in-law, was home. 1 month later, the house on Oak Avenue buzzed with the warm chaos of Thanksgiving preparations. Sarah had insisted on cooking her first holiday meal for the family, determined to contribute something meaningful to their new life together. The kitchen was filled with the scent of roasting turkey and homemade stuffing, while Emma helped by sneaking tastes of everything within reach. "Aunt Sarah, can I put the marshmallows on the sweet potatoes now?" Emma asked, bouncing on her toes beside the counter. "In about 10 more minutes, sweetheart," Sarah replied, checking the timer. "We want them to be golden brown, not burned to a crisp." Michael watched from the doorway, marveling at how natural this all felt. Over the past month, Sarah had seamlessly integrated into their daily routine. She helped Emma with homework each afternoon, contributed to household expenses with the disability benefits she'd finally been able to access, and brought a warmth to their home that had been missing since Jennifer's death. More importantly, she'd brought stories. Stories about Jennifer's childhood, about their life together before the adoption, about the sister Michael had married but never fully known. Emma hung on every word, treasuring these glimpses into her mother's past, like precious gifts. "Daddy, look!" Emma called, interrupting his thoughts. "Aunt Sarah taught me how to braid the bread dough just like Mommy used to do when she was little." Michael approached the counter, where Sarah was patiently guiding Emma's small fingers in creating an intricate braided loaf. "That's beautiful, Em. Your mom would be so proud." "Aunt Sarah says Mommy learned it from their grandmother," Emma said proudly, "before their mama got sick and couldn't take care of them anymore." Sarah met Michael's eyes over Emma's head. They'd gradually shared more details of their childhood with Emma, always age-appropriate but honest, about the difficulties they'd faced. Emma had accepted it all with the matter-of-fact resilience of childhood, simply adding these new pieces to her understanding of her family's history. The doorbell rang, interrupting the cooking preparations. Michael went to answer it, returning with Mrs. Patterson, Emma's teacher, who lived next door and had been invited to join their Thanksgiving dinner. "Mrs. Patterson!" Emma exclaimed, running to hug her elderly neighbor. "Come see what me and Aunt Sarah made." As Emma dragged Mrs. Patterson toward the kitchen, the older woman caught sight of Sarah and stopped short. "Oh my," she said softly, her hand rising to her chest. "You must be Sarah. Emma's told me so much about you, but she didn't mention how much you resemble Jennifer." Sarah smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Patterson. Emma talks about you all the time. The resemblance is remarkable," Mrs. Patterson continued, studying Sarah's face. "Though I suppose that makes sense, being sisters and all. Jennifer mentioned once that she had a sister she'd lost touch with. I'm so glad you found each other again." "Actually," Michael interjected gently, "we found each other quite by accident. It's a rather amazing story." As they gathered around the dining table, Michael suggested they each share something they were grateful for before the meal. Emma went first, her face serious with the importance of the moment. "I'm grateful for Daddy, and for Aunt Sarah, and for Mrs. Patterson, and for my teacher, and for our house, and for Mommy even though she's in heaven, and for—" Her list continued for several minutes, encompassing everything from her favorite books to the squirrels in their backyard. Mrs. Patterson spoke next, her voice warm with affection. "I'm grateful for neighbors who become family, for children who remind us what joy looks like, and for the unexpected ways life brings people together." Michael's turn came, and he looked around the table with emotions too complex to fully express. "I'm grateful for second chances," he said simply, "for the way love multiplies instead of divides, and for the family we've found in the most unexpected places." Finally, all eyes turned to Sarah. She'd been dreading this moment, afraid her voice would break with the weight of everything she felt. But looking at these faces, Emma's bright expectation, Mrs. Patterson's kind interest, Michael's steady encouragement, she found her words. "I'm grateful for bus stops," she said, earning puzzled looks from Emma and Mrs. Patterson, "for rainy nights and kind strangers who turn out to be family. I'm grateful for forgiveness, for second chances, and for little girls who teach you that love doesn't have to be complicated to be real. Emma beamed at her. That was pretty, Aunt Sarah. Even the bus stop part, which was kinda weird. As they ate, conversation flowed easily around the table. Emma chattered about school, Mrs. Patterson shared stories from her 40 years of teaching, and Michael talked about the new project his construction crew was starting after the holidays. Sarah found herself marveling at the normalcy of it all. 6 weeks ago, she'd been homeless and hopeless, convinced that she'd lost everything worth having. Now she was part of a family Thanksgiving, listening to ordinary conversations about ordinary life, feeling extraordinarily grateful for the gift of belonging somewhere. After dinner, while the adults cleaned up, Emma disappeared into her room and returned with a construction paper project she'd been working on at school. "It's a family tree," she announced proudly, unrolling a large sheet of paper covered with hand-drawn branches and leaves. "I had to ask Mrs. Patterson for extra paper because our family got bigger." Sarah examined the artwork, her throat tightening with emotion. At the top of the tree was a photo of Jennifer labeled Mommy in Heaven. Below that were pictures of Michael and Emma, and beside Emma's photo was a recent snapshot Michael had taken of Sarah and Emma together, labeled Aunt Sarah in Emma's careful printing. But what made Sarah's eyes fill with tears were the additional branches Emma had drawn, extending back to previous generations. She'd labeled spaces for Grandma Miller and Great-Grandma who taught Mommy to braid bread, and Great-Grandpa who was really tall like Daddy. "Emma, this is incredible," Sarah whispered. "How did you know about all these people?" "You told me about them," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "When you tell stories about you and Mommy when you were little, I remembered all their names." Sarah realized that in sharing memories of their childhood, she'd been giving Emma something precious, a sense of extended family, of roots that reached back beyond the immediate circle of people in her daily life. "There's one more thing," Emma said, producing another piece of paper. "I made this for you." The second paper showed a simple drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one labeled Daddy, a medium one labeled Emma, and one in what was clearly meant to be a wheelchair labeled Aunt Sarah. Above them, floating like a guardian angel, was a 4th figure with long blonde hair labeled Mommy watching over us. "We're all together now," Emma explained. "Even Mommy in a way." Sarah couldn't speak. She pulled Emma into a fierce hug, overwhelmed by the wisdom and acceptance of this 6-year-old who'd lost her mother, but had somehow found room in her heart for an aunt she'd never known existed. Later that evening, after Mrs. Patterson had gone home, and Emma had finally fallen asleep, despite her sugar-induced excitement, Michael and Sarah sat on the front porch swing that Jennifer had insisted they install during their first year in the house. "Penny for your thoughts," Michael said, noting Sarah's contemplative silence. "I was just thinking about Jennifer," Sarah replied, "about how different things might have been if we'd found each other before she got sick, if I'd been here for the wedding, for Emma's birth, for all those milestones." Michael was quiet for a moment. "Do you think it would have been better if you'd been here all along?" Sarah considered this. "In some ways, yes. But Michael, if I'd found Jennifer 5 years ago, I would still have been using. I would have been the addict sister who disrupted family dinners and worried everyone and probably would have stolen money from your wallet to buy pills." Michael winced slightly at her bluntness, but Sarah continued. "Emma would have memories of an aunt who disappointed her, who made her mother cry, who had to be asked to leave family gatherings. Instead, she gets to know me now, when I'm healthy and sober and actually capable of being the aunt she deserves. You think Jennifer would see it that way?" Sarah smiled, touching the small scar on her eyebrow that matched the one Jennifer had carried. "I think Jennifer would say that everything happened exactly when it was supposed to happen. She always believed in divine timing, even when we were kids." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the early winter stars emerge in the clear sky. The air was cold enough to see their breath, but neither wanted to go inside yet. "Michael," Sarah said eventually, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." Do you ever worry that having me here makes it harder to move on? That I'm keeping Jennifer's memory so present that you can't? I don't know, Heel. Find someone new eventually? Michael turned to look at her, his expression serious. Is that what you think? That you're holding me back somehow? I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if constantly talking about Jennifer, sharing all these stories with Emma, might be preventing you from moving forward with your life. Michael shook his head slowly. Sarah, for 3 years, I tried to keep Jennifer's memory alive all by myself. I had photo albums and videos, but Emma was so young when Jennifer died that most of her memories were fading. I was terrified that Emma would forget her mother entirely. He paused, his voice growing softer. But you bring Jennifer to life in ways I never could. You give Emma stories I never heard, family connections I never knew existed. You're not keeping me trapped in the past. You're helping me build a bridge between Jennifer's memory and our future. Sarah felt a weight she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying begin to lift from her shoulders. Besides, Michael added with a slight smile, you're not Jennifer, you're Sarah. You're Emma's aunt and my sister-in-law, and you belong in our lives not because of who you used to be to Jennifer, but because of who you are to us now. As they finally headed inside, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the despair of that rainy night at the bus stop to the warmth of belonging to a family again, from the devastation of discovering her sister had died to the joy of knowing Emma and becoming part of her life. In her room that night, Sarah opened the drawer where she kept her most precious possessions. Inside was the family tree Emma had made, the drawing of their new family configuration, and a new addition, a letter she'd started writing to Jennifer. "Dear Jenny," it began, "I found them. I found your husband and your daughter, and they're amazing. I know you probably had a hand in getting us all together, because this kind of coincidence doesn't happen without some divine intervention. Emma has your smile and your laugh, and she's so smart and funny and full of love. Michael is exactly the kind of man I would have wanted you to marry, kind and strong and devoted to Emma in a way that would make you so proud. I wish you were here to see how beautiful your daughter is, how much she loves hearing stories about you, how naturally she's accepted me into her life. But I promise you, Jennifer, I'll take care of them. I'll make sure Emma knows how much you loved her, and I'll be the aunt she deserves, and I'll help Michael remember the good times while still living fully in the present. I love you, little sister. Thank you for leading me home." Outside, snow began to fall, the first snow of the season, dusting the neighborhood in pristine white. Sarah watched from her window as it covered the world in a blanket of new beginnings, and she knew that tomorrow would bring new adventures, new memories, and new opportunities to be grateful for the miraculous series of events that had brought her family back together. In the master bedroom, Michael lay awake thinking similar thoughts. For the first time since Jennifer's death, he felt truly hopeful about the future. Emma had an aunt who adored her. He had a sister-in-law who understood his grief and supported his parenting, and their little family of 3 had found a balance that honored the past while embracing the promise of tomorrow. As sleep finally claimed them all, the house on Oak Avenue settled into peaceful quiet. But upstairs, in Emma's room, a 6-year-old girl dreamed of family trees with deep roots and spreading branches, of mothers who watched from heaven and aunts who taught you to braid bread, of fathers who rescued strangers and discovered they were rescuing family all along. And in that dream, Jennifer Miller Thompson smiled, knowing that love had found a way to bring her family together at exactly the moment they needed each other most. The stranger at the bus stop had come home, and the circle was finally beautifully complete.